Okay, today what I'm going to be working on is making these Chakram out of wootz. So I'm going to walk you step by step through the process. First here, and then actually forging. So I start off with blocks of wootz. They've been forged kind of to size, and then I did some calculations to figure out how much volume I needed. Next step is to hot punch. So in hot punching, first I will drive a steel punch through from one side until I get a little over halfway through, then flip over, punch through the other way. That'll actually pop out a little chunk of material. Let's go do it. So now that I've punched it, I've got that nice kind of rectangular hole through there. Next thing to do is drift that out. So I'll be driving a round drift. It's tapered. What that does, it helps expand the hole. I will also start working a little bit under the hammer, kind of forging around that drift to help begin stretching the material. Now that I've got the drift in there, so like I was saying, do some drifting, start forging in the corners a little bit, and once I get to kind of maximum size on that drift, I'll be moving on to forging under the hammer, and that'll be the next step. working under the drawing dies of the hammer, what I do is actually just stretch this material, and it slowly opens up the that hole that I punched. And then I'll start working actually with just the hand hammer, working those corners in, and continue with that process over the horn of the anvil, just evening out, beginning to even out my piece. That really just kind of melds directly into this stage where I'm really trying to get a blank where I've got just a smooth donut. It's essentially rectangular cross section, and that in turn essentially goes directly into this stage of beveling. So, as we can see, maybe you can't see, not sure. In the beveling stage, all I'm doing is thinning that outer edge. And also, while I'm doing that, as I hammer the outer edge, I can use the stretch I get from that to affect how much curve I have in those areas. So the whole reason that I did that punch and drawing out system was to avoid doing a forge weld. Another method that would allow avoiding a forge weld was suggested to me by Rick Furr, And that was to make sort of this dog bone shape as the starting point. Punch a hole at either end, slit with a chisel in between, and begin opening that up. And then the process is essentially the same coming through. So begin opening that up, even out the thicknesses, round, finish beveled. That, whether it's faster than what I did or not, no way to know without having tried it. So the most traditional way to make Chakram would have actually been to forge out a bar of wootz of the appropriate length, bend it around into a circle, probably a little bit undersized, and then scarf those ends and overlap them. So you can see that you taper out the two ends and then overlap that by enough that you actually made it thicker than you want it to be where they're overlapping, which gives you a little bit of extra material to compress, or not compress, but to forge out during the welding process. And you should end up with a solid piece. I had avoided this route from the beginning because I have done some forge welding or attempted forge welding of wootz in the past without much success. So even though this is by far the simpler method, for me it also was a riskier method, having the power hammer to be able to draw out the material using just the punch and expand method seemed better. I did have one that during that forging process split in such a way that I ended up cutting it and forge welding it. So I could have, theoretically, this one here, I ended up forge welding anyways. It actually went pretty well, so kind of kicking myself for not taking the riskier approach from the beginning. But it does have the other downside that where it's forge welded, there will almost certainly be a visible line probably where deoxidation or decarburization will have burned out the pattern, so to speak. But we'll see that in the final product. But yeah, so the whole reason that I didn't go this way initially was to avoid that forge welding risk. If you are forge welding wootz, things you have to keep in mind, the actual kind of standard forge welding temperature that most of us use as bladesmiths is too high. It's often said to be about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, most wootz will be in its mushy state, where you've actually got a liquid phase constituent there, and it'll just come apart. So you definitely have to use a slightly lower welding temperature. For this, I had good success just with a borax flux, a relatively short soak at a slightly lower temperature. Came together great. So maybe next time I get an order for some chakrams, I'll try that route right from the beginning.